My name is Chris. I run UNICEF's Ventures team. I'm going to ignore you. And I wanted to just follow up what Aya had said by talking for about 10 minutes about some really exciting things that we think are happening in the blockchain space globally. But first of all, I wanted to introduce what our team is. I didn't know about UNICEF when I joined. I did tech startups, mostly in East Africa and the Middle East. So I knew it was like this big organization, something to do with kids. So I don't know if that's sort of tracking with other people's ideas of it. But I certainly didn't know that it was this organization that existed globally at such a big scope. It's a $5.5 billion a year organization. And it's an organization that does things like buy 1/3 of the world's vaccines, which means that in addition to helping the most marginalized communities, it can also do things like market shaping, like making sure that companies are producing products that otherwise wouldn't necessarily get to market. This is a network map that we did recently of UNICEF, so these are all the people who communicate with each other. And it's a kind of massively decentralized, centralized bureaucracy, but it's super old. And so a lot of what our team tries to do, we're a 20-person team within this, is try to figure out how to get this organization into the future, or at least into like 1995. UNICEF was built to fight for the rights of the world's most marginalized people. These are the bottom quintile, the bottom 20% of people, particularly kids and mothers, who are kind of left out of everybody's development plan. They don't make product development plans. If you're a government, they're like point C or D, it's phase 7. And the infrastructure that we take for granted never gets built for the bottom quintile. And you can see that in this country, as well as in the other 189 countries that we work in. And so our team has tried to use some of the approaches that we think are valuable, some of the things like the ability to move information quickly, or the ability to start provoking ideas around identity, to make sure that what we see as the exciting things coming in the next 20 or 30 years are able to affect everybody positively. And so I just wanted to tell basically, I'll tell you 3 things. One is what keeps us up at night, and I guess the second is what's keeping us in the office. Wow, look at that. What's keeping us in the office late in the evening. So if you've been following anything for the last 6-7 years, you know that the number of people on the move is growing. Right now, there are about 55 to 60 million kids who are on the move, displaced because of war or violence. These are kids that you now see a lot in the news, either in the US or in Europe, but have traditionally, over the 20 years prior, existed mostly in Central Africa and South Asia. And these are kids who don't have a sovereign ID. If you're a Syrian kid going through the refugee trail in Europe, you probably go through 5 different paper IDs, and each time at each country, you're asked a set of horrible questions about what went wrong and what happened to you to get here. And that's difficult, and it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't need to be that way. We know that we're trying to respond to the most vulnerable populations in a time where climate is changing faster than ever, and the areas in red are where you're going to see, if climate stops at 1 degree Celsius, which we don't think it is, the areas in red are where you're going to see a 2 to 3% drop in per capita output. And that is scary because those countries that are in red are often the countries where you have the highest population growth rates as well and the greatest lack of services. We know that there are awesome things coming, like robots. Robots are cool. Robots are less cool if you are a woman, if you are on the edge of a tightly bound social network, or if you are one of the people in the bottom quintile. And they're especially less cool if you're meeting all 3 of those criteria, because you are the most vulnerable to automation. It's most likely that your job gets automated and that you have nothing to flip your work into, while people in urban areas who are well-connected, wealthy, white men get to take advantage of automation. And also, diseases move really fast now. We saw this with the Ebola outbreak. We've seen it with avian influenza and so on. So these are all, this is all the depressing stuff, but this is the meaning that our team finds. This is what we get up for in the morning. And UNICEF works in a lot of emergencies as well, over 300 in the last 2 years. But so as we were kind of looking at how we could use text messages to move information more quickly, or use distributed databases to look at providing identity, we also tried to eat our own dog food. And I wanted to just show you something. This is a new project that just got launched officially 2 days ago in Dubai. This is a map of Colombia, and this is a map of 60,000 schools in Colombia. It's a map of connectivity. So the schools that are in green have 3G. You can do a Skype in those schools. You can communicate well. The schools in yellow have 2G. You can make a phone call or send an SMS. And the schools in red have no G. There's no connectivity in those communities, no access to information. It really doesn't matter how distributed your ledger is. It won't get there yet. And this is a map for us of inequality, and it's a map of what we can do to advance the world, because there's a hypothesis that if you're connected to opportunity and choice, you live a life with a little bit more dignity. But let me show, this is interesting. So this is a similar map of the US. And as we focus on kind of these externalities and all of the things around us, we sometimes forget that the walls that we build as a human species are internal, and they're walls of poverty and lack of access. If you look at where people don't graduate from school here, it's exactly an inverse of that connectivity map. And it shows you that problems that we're facing as UNICEF, that we're working towards as this big international organization, are present here. If you look in Colorado, if you look at Southeast Colorado, you see these same types of problems and issues magnified, and you see problems that we're used to thinking about as developing world, but in fact, they're just problems of inequality. We wanted to test, this is a total lie. I'm showing you something that does not exist, but that's okay. It's a hackathon. About a year ago, we thought, wouldn't it be great if there was some way to gather up this information about school connectivity and where schools were and weren't connected, and allow governments or others who are interested to fund it. It broke with MetaMask. Everything breaks with MetaMask. But wouldn't it be great if we could allow people to start funding this? And this is a map of Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia pays 7 times as much for their kilobyte as Kazakhstan, the neighboring country, does. That's the disparity. And when you talk to the government of Kyrgyzstan, they're like, it should be fair and open, and people should be able to see how much we're paying. And we thought, wouldn't that be a great application for some kind of accountable ledger where you could see the schools, again, green is good connectivity, red is really bad connectivity, and where you could start to see with your funding, with your input, where you were producing human value. This doesn't exist, but it shows you the approach, at least that our team is taking, to addressing some of these problems or having discussions in a slightly new way. We also wanted to test out how we could find and identify companies working in the blockchain space. So as I mentioned, in January, we had a workshop of the first 6 companies that we've invested in through our venture fund. We've got a $20 million early stage seed fund that does investments purely in open source tech. We picked 6 companies from around the world. I love it. We picked 6 companies from around the world and brought them together, brought them to New York. We're funding them for a little more than $500,000 total. And these are companies that are doing everything from authenticating supply chain for vaccines in India to looking at how you can parcel up connectivity, a gigabyte into kilobytes and a kilobyte into bytes and a byte into, I don't know, satoshis, in Bangladesh, and be able to resell those pieces of connectivity. We're looking at a company also in Mexico that's using vaccine records and provision of medical prescriptions to actually empower people to make sure they're getting the right drugs. And these are companies that we wouldn't have found easily. It took us quite a bit of searching, but we believe that the global infrastructure that we have and that the Ethereum Foundation represents, and with all of you in the room, can help accelerate these companies and show some real proofs of concept quickly. The last thing I'll say is that we do want to test something with everybody today, and we're super psyched to be working with ETH Denver and everybody else on a new approach to engaging particularly developers, but also a broader audience in this type of positive action. So Christina here leads our blockchain product. She's in the front row waving there, and has been developing the idea around the Boost token for the last month or 2. We wanted to test out, and you can go to the colorado.bounties.network to see it. We wanted to test out what would happen if we started to create some tokenization around social good, and to do it in a space that was controlled, sort of, like a hackathon. So we're going to see how this works. We're looking for people who are either helping to contribute to the external economy or looking at building up impactful products, everything from code to commenting to translation. And then we have some pretty exciting opportunities to benefit from this as well. We're going to be joined by a few friends from Newsweek who are about to put out a serious issue on blockchain for social good, and they've kindly offered to help with some of the mentorship and exposure for the projects that come out of these 2 days, and also for potential further funding for other bounties. So really exciting to hear what you think about that, and you can find out a bit more about it here. I'm going to go to the next slide, but it's colorados.bounties. Oh, there it is. It's everywhere. If you want to read more about the work that I mentioned, I don't want to take up a ton of time on an evening, please feel free to find us online. We're pretty active on social, and we look forward to being here with you for the next few days. Thank you.